All right, so I'd like to call to order the policy committee meeting. I recognize that all board members are present. With Katie and Judy and myself. And so the first thing I'd like is an approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. I don't believe we have any public comments this time. And our first item of business is policies for discussion and review. Consideration is the 300 series that we have been, as we're going through and we're doing policies. We are in the 300s now. And I met with Randy, who's not able to be here right now, and Rebecca to kind of take a stab at the 300 series. And as you know, we have the resource guide, the WASD resource guide that we're using as a guideline. And so we take our current policies and take theirs, kind of compare the two and try to make sense and really merge it or just kind of redo ours with that in mind. So with that, the first group here is that we're looking at is instructional goals policy. And Tim, I don't know if you'd like to take over and speak to this at all?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Ted.
I have one question before you start. What does PRG stand for?
Resource guide.
Research, yeah.
So that's the
Policy
WASB.
resource-
Policy resource.
Policy
Policy,
resource.
okay.
That's what we purchased through WASD that have been helping us along with this.
Thank you.
And so it's a great, well, maybe Rebecca would say differently. It's a pretty involved tool for
It's pretty
taking
involved tool.
policies that are, that they have set up and keeping track of their history and when changes are made. It really
To
notifies.
see what the laws have
Yep.
changed and
Yep.
stuff.
So-
Yeah, good.
Yeah, and thank you, Ted.
Yeah.
So, the process that Randy has been envisioning for this is, as you know, policies are broken down into different groupings. We're in the 300 series, which is generally related to instruction. And we've been trying to chunk them out by groupings. Randy's been meeting with the administrators who are closest to that grouping of policies as an early phase in the process. So Amy Johnson and I met with Randy and Rebecca maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago to do this. And so the document you have in front of you is reflective of those conversations. So what I'll do is I will step through this, and if you have questions, we can stop and we can get some clarification. Or you can, if you've got just some overall comments, you can save those for the end. But this is a big series, and
I think Rebecca has a comment.
I just wanted to let you know, Tim, that we did meet with Ted then, so I do have an updated, you see that he has that last
Yes.
column? That we met with Ted, and we are only doing 310 through 330. So while you're saying it is big, it still is big. We're only doing that amount this morning.
Yeah.
So as you guys are talking about it, I'm happy to bring up the documents that I attached if you need to, if you want to actually look at the policy. But this is the summary of what has been discussed already.
so the first one we have here is 310 instructional goals. And again, our lens, the whole reason why we are engaging in this particular process, and I think this is important for everyone to understand, is we have not undertaken a thorough and comprehensive review of all of our policies in a very long time. We are more vintage than going to a high-end wine shop, quite frankly, and you can see that at the bottom of our policies. And what we've done up to this point is when we've had a particular need or there's been a clear change in state statute or state regulation, we've updated when we've needed to. But a lot of the thinking here has not been revisited in a very, very long time. So what we're doing in working with WASB, and I know I'm partly restating what you as a committee know, but I also want this understood for anyone viewing, is the School Boards Association has a general approach, and their recommendation is always going to be policies prescribe actions. And so as a board, anytime you go beyond what is required or essential, you are basically creating limits where there may not need to be limits. So WASB's guidance is always going to be a more minimalistic approach. And so that's kind of reflected in here. And so just because something comes off of policy doesn't mean we don't value it as an organization. Doesn't mean that we might not try to pursue it through practices, but it means we look at what really has the force of policy, because policy is basically your laws, to kind of think about it that way. WASB's guidance is to be economical with that. So when we look at the first one, 310, we have an instructional goals policy. This is not something that is required by law. It's not on WASB's checklist. It was last revised 20 years ago for us. And as we talked about it administratively, our sense was we need to repeal, and kind of reading the column, which was reflecting the meeting that Ted, you had with Randy and Rebecca, I see we're still kind of on the repeal path. So.
Right, I guess when you said repeal of it, it was, or when we talked about it, they're obviously all good things that appear to be in other areas.
Yes.
It's not as if this policy is needed, but they're all stuff that is specifically addressed in other spots.
Right, and so with that in mind, why haven't we done it?
Correct.
And the next one, is similar. The academic freedom policy is not something that's required by statute. It's not something that's part of the WASB checklist policy. And our particular one really doesn't necessarily reflect kind of current approaches to this topic in the K-12 arena. It really, in a lot of respects, kind of harkens back to more of a collegiate setting. And so, again, this is something, that's kind of in the lines of we value the professional autonomy of our teachers, but do we need to have a policy that really doesn't seem to be really modeled on elementary and secondary schools as part of our policy? And so as we looked at this administratively, we agreed with WASB's questioning that this is probably due to come off. But we also understand that there may be questions about, well, is there a message here when you are taking this off? So I do think this is something where if we do go ahead with a repeal, we're going to want to reach out to stakeholders, in particular, I think our teachers, kind of explain what's happening, explaining that we're not really looking to change what's happening on a day-to-day basis, but just as part of our policy review, this kind of stuck out as an anomaly, and we're really trying to streamline our policy structure.
How do you think that feedback would be, and like what form would it be? It's like, hey, we're gonna remove this, and what would it be addressed in a different way?
Well, I mean, I think, and again, Randy's not here. I want to be careful not to speak for Randy. I mean, my suggestion, would be that we're proactive. We engage our teacher leaders. We would engage the WTA, explain this is coming as an intention, explain kind of what the thinking and rationale is behind it, and ask what questions they might have. I mean, I think we want to, explain the background of it, but also hear what concerns, if any. And we may be over anticipating here. I mean, there might not be any substantive concerns, but that would be my thought.
Do you think this harkens back to that flow chart of teachers talking about difficult subjects that was already brought up earlier?
That is a connection we could draw. I mean, because I do think, there's another example of something that's not in policy.
Yeah.
But it provides guidance to teachers. But again, policies are like your ordinances, they're like your statutes. They have a lot of force, and they also require some work to change. So I think it's important to kind of, what's the purpose of policy? What's the purpose of other guidance?
And I think another thing pointed out in that meeting, like, there's nothing specific here. They're all statements that are, really a commitment to a democratic tradition and its methods. Well, court, there's nothing that to hold them to
Right.
specifically, and I think that's the point of the repeal, unless you're gonna
Say
define it a
something.
little more. It's too broad.
That's a great point, Ted. I mean, they don't really drive action. And, those ideals, we have mission statements, we have vision statements, we have some of our strategic guidelines, visionary guidelines. So would like policy to actually be something that guides action. And again, when we look at 312, this is something that, again, is neither required by law, nor is it a checklist policy. And I think, as, again, we looked at it administratively, these are topics you'll see in your handbook. And so it is handbook season. So those of you who are parents would have seen the online registration notice and the opportunity to review the handbook, sign off on them. I have the high school handbook right in my kind of mental map right now, and I can see the section on academic honesty in the handbook. And you as a board approve the handbooks. So we have these elements in the handbooks that a board approved, that parents see. Policy we felt was redundant. So when WASB posed the question, we said, that's another one we would recommend goes away. We need to make sure there's language about it in our student handbooks, but we believe there is.
And I think, again, a point that I made, if we were removing it from here, depending on how our history timeline will show with the WSB thing, somehow to point like this is removed, but it is now, you can refer to handbook such and such that really dealt with these issues. I think that would be kind of an important thing.
Yeah.
To give them some guidance to them. So
Are you talking about teachers or parents?
about anyone who's looking, it's like, why was this removed? I mean, maybe it does remove and you don't even see a history of it, but it was removed. So please refer to the handbook, to find what.
Because we don't value academic honesty any less with this recommendation.
Correct.
But we have it in the handbook. There's no need to have it in policy as long as we're committed to keeping it in the handbook, which we are.
And following to clean up the policy.
Yeah.
Like that.
But I do think there's going to need to be some thought given to just kind of the overall communication with families and teachers. So school year calendar 321. This is something where School Boards Association does have a sample. And we have the 321 sample 2. And our old policy is very outdated. It references a 180-day requirement that no longer exists. It references to collectively bargaining the school year and calendar. And certainly we have an advisory committee that provides staff input on the calendar. But calendars haven't been subject to collective bargaining in Wisconsin since Act 10. So this is overdue house. Moving on to 321.1. This is our policy, our local policy, creating some scheduling protection for Wednesday evenings and Sunday activities. And School Boards Association notes that this is neither required by law nor is a checklist policy. This was last touched 20 years ago. Our feeling is that would like to, for now, keep it, always subject to review. But when we do run into instances with weather, or we have instances that fall in windows in the year when we actually have a pretty good understanding there's not a scheduling conflict on Wednesdays, and we confirm that with community organizations that utilize that Wednesday functionality. There is a mechanism in policy for a superintendent approval of something on a protected date, and Randy feels that process is working well.
Do you think, which came first there? That there's nothing scheduled Wednesday night from churches, or they decided they can't make it stick anyway because school's doing something? I mean, there's sports activities on Wednesday nights. And I think the
Only
churches,
until 6 or 6. they stop early is what the policy says.
What comes into play is the clubs. That's not the school.
Oh,
So the school,
true.
they're all done with practice and everything by 6.
I know,
Unless there's a weather.
I just know
exception.
churches have had real trouble with Wednesday nights anymore, so.
And the way it is worded, it actually says family learning time or something to that effect. That would open it up if you want me to. I think you'll-
No, I think I printed it, but yeah, it's pretty broad and I was surprised that we were even gonna keep it. Is it even effective?
From what, so the schools surrounding us, it's, when I asked the question, the Big Eight does not have this. So the Big Eight is one that like they still have sporting, or they had sporting events on Wednesdays, so that would potentially conflict with it, but
Right, if we ever change to the Big Eight, Randy said that this will be a major conflict, but as of right now, the Badger Conference abides by this.
correct.
Well, and I'm not saying churches are trying to do stuff, but I just know that the pressure was really tough to get anything going on a Wednesday night.
Can I just ask a question, Tim? Are you aware, are the churches still doing their student learning events that night? Or have they gone all?
So,
They do that yet? Okay, because I know during COVID, they were all online. But they have gone back to in-person kind of community ed or ecumenical.
There's a few that I'm aware of that. I don't know about all of them, but there's a few.
I think they've got more creative, and so it's not just every Wednesday night we've got confirmation but that's not it there anymore. I've got to be creative.
so as Ken and Rebecca mentioned, if we do have a conference change in the future, and realistically, as you look at enrollments for ourselves, enrollments of other schools in our general area, it's no longer a long-term horizon. It's probably more of a short-term to medium-term horizon that the Big Eight will come into question. And so we might need to look at changes then. I think the question is, what do we want to do now? Mandy's sense was that it's working, but I mean, this is a conversation I can take back to him. And I think it's also something for you to kind of consider as a committee, how you want to proceed.
I think there's been a cultural shift since 2002. So, I think I don't think we have any sacred time anymore that's appreciated by the whole community. There is no definite, you can't do things here and here other than Sunday morning, but
Mhm.
so I don't have any trouble keeping it, and I'm just kind of,
I'm for keeping it in there.
yeah, that's fine.
The next one is the 322 school day. And there is a suggested policy that school board has. Our feeling is it implicates other areas. We could actually kind of take it out. That was our conversation administratively, and it looks like that was how the conversation went when you met with Andy.
It was, I don't have any specifics as to.
They really covered it a lot in 321, which is just up on the bottom of the page
The previous one.
Or yeah. And so it was all saying the same thing. So instead of having,
Correct.
Instead of two policies, we have one. 323 special observance days, and so our policy actually contains all of the special observance days that were recognized at the time of the policy. And so WASB's recommendation, which we agree with, is let's go with their model policy, which recognizes that these dates exist, but doesn't enumerate them because they do change from time to time.
Well, I want to know what Mildred Fish is going to do. When you don't honor her anymore.
Well, we will
Wherever
keep,
she is.
we keep her internally, but, do we
Who
need
is
Mildred
she?
Fish in policy?
Who is that person? I've never heard of that before. Mildred Fish Arnett Day.
And the discussion we're having on, these are observed in school, like announcements.
Yeah, there's an
There is-
announcement, a little.
And they do a
blurb
little,
on it, yeah.
Is that what they do?
yeah, so that, like, it is observed.
We don't all dress like Mildred Fish on that day?
I don't think so.
No, we don't.
Okay. All right.
Okay, just moving along in my document. Holidays and religious observances. This had kind of a longer response from our WASB legal consultant. And our thinking is, we spent a lot of time as a district on this only a few years ago. And even though there are some different ways to approach it, which again, the WASB attorney describes in some detail, our recommendation is, since it has been the beneficiary of a lot of board attention only a few years ago, that we retain it and just add the cross references and not touch it. 323.3.
Concerns or questions? about that?
No, no, I just appreciate all the work that has gone into this stuff.
323, National Anthem, Pledge of Allegiance flag display. Again, this is describing what is in state statute. So we are required to do everything that's in this policy, whether we have it in policy or not, because it is prescribed by law. And so, PRG doesn't have a sample because it's frankly a statutory requirement. Our administrative piece was to keep. I think the recommendation, and maybe Ted and Rebecca, I wasn't in that meeting, you could kind of touch on
I
this
think it
more.
touches on what our broader discussion about flag displays. And it was
Especially
interesting-
just third display, yeah.
And it was interesting because I think this was a little bit of news to us when we were reviewing this, that this actually came up. But I think it'll dovetail into that broader discussion that we still have open. And so at this point, we probably consider keeping this, but it will most likely morph into something else as that discussion progresses.
Thank you, Ted.
And just to add, the reason Randy said he totally missed it was this is focusing more on the Pledge of Allegiance. And so he didn't realize that it had flag components on there,
Mhm.
other than the pledge.
Yep, but that's really, keep it as it is, but we need to look at this one as we're talking about the other one as well.
330, curriculum adoption. They have a sample policy. And their sample includes curriculum plan requirements found in PI 8, which are the DPI regulations. Our thinking administratively was to keep our current policy. Our current policy is one we've had for a very long time. It is a little less prescriptive than the other, and quite frankly, where we need to follow PI 8, we have to follow PI 8 anyway. So our thinking was not to make changes, and it looks like the conversation at the next phase was to keep, but potentially swing back into curriculum committee to kind of look at these concepts in more detail.
What I remember from our conversation, Ted, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you were wondering why our current curriculum operations work better with the old one versus the new one. And Randy felt he couldn't speak on that. He wanted you to speak.
Oh, okay. Well, I would say if you look at, again, it's the concept of you want policies to be specific and drive action. At the same time, you don't want to have an overly elaborate policy beyond what you need to guide action on things we feel most importantly about, when you can accomplish the others through guidelines and practices that are more flexible but changing when you need to make a change. And so when we had the conversation, my suggestion was keep it as it is, just because it has worked well and it doesn't necessarily tie us in. And there are one or two operational pieces that I thought if we went with the school board policy, we might have to consider. So I felt it would be better, and I think at that meeting, kind of, that was Randy and Amy's thinking as well. If it's a topic you want to kind of explore a little more, maybe we could go, actually, this is our last one, isn't it, Rebecca? So I mean, if you want to, we certainly are not short on time, Ted. If you want us to bring up our current policy, and if, do you have the PRG recommendation of ASB handy, Rebecca?
Yes, I do. Sometimes I get flippy with my.
I think that was my, talking about that, seeing that our current one, it's so brief, couple statements, not much to it, so there isn't a whole lot of definition given, and that curriculum, quite honestly, has come up in a lot of discussions lately, and so just my brief take on it was, well, let's hold on a little bit, and maybe it does require a little bit more.
I thought I pulled that over, but apparently I did not.
This is the one we're looking for the current one.
I have the current one. I don't, he was wanting
Yeah, the three.
The recommendation from
This one?
policy. Yeah.
oh, it would be in here.
Yeah.
I know it's. It's in the extra.
It's in the end.
So I need to just bear with me.
Nope, it's all good.
Bear with me.
We were very efficient through our review, so we have a little time here.
So that's research, it should be able to go on to the front.
These are ours.
No, these are our,
Oh, this is the, okay, I got it. Yep.
There we go.
so let me see if I can enlarge it. Just a bit. That's the first part.
I mean, I think, in terms of kind of the conceptual emphasis in the front matter of the WASB piece, I think that, there's nothing we have any concerns with at all. And again, when we look at, you could scroll down on the 1 through 5, community involvement, we seek to engage stakeholders on this. We survey families, where it's appropriate, we survey students. We have work teams. So I mean, I think there's more to it. Let's keep going. There's something. Okay, and so the curriculum guides, I think, are a fine idea. I would say the biggest, but again, we want curriculum guides. We want to have that defined in policy. No, back up. Assessments, atmosphere. Keep going. Yeah, so I mean, I think, somewhere in here, there's trying to remember what we thought at the time in that meeting was just a little too defined. I mean, I think the things that are in here, we do.
Is it the curriculum guide itself? Do we currently have the curriculum?
We don't currently publish our curriculum guides to the website. You know, we have teachers provide their syllabus at the start of the year, but I don't think it's that. It is.
And so whether it was all of these or not, I thought a little bit, the current policies need to be augmented a little bit to this extent.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that probably, if we were to look at what we have, that probably wouldn't be there, but it's certainly not a bad idea, would be that last piece on integrating the technology and computer literacy into the guides for all grade levels. That I don't think if you look at the guides today, you wouldn't see that in all of them. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't. But I just think, you know, looking at that, we thought these would be, some of these things we have to do already and we do them. There are others that, you know, we felt like it would, again, like that 6, that's a good thing to aspire to and do. But did we really want it all in the policy?
Sure.
And again, you know, maybe this is a good question to discuss here more. Maybe this is a good piece to take into the curriculum committee for feedback, and then have the curriculum committee make a recommendation. I feel like there was something in here that was very particular,
I know, and to K6 is my,
and it was strictly for K6.
that's what I was trying to.
And I guess how we ended our little meeting discussion about this, everything we've talked to this point, I thought was pretty clear cut. This one, I think it required a little bit, probably more discussion, maybe you reviewing it and we could bring it back, because that was, we cut it short already, and I thought this could be part
This
of that
one,
next group.
definitely we could bring this one back up with the next group again.
Yeah,
And what I was gonna say was, at this point, now we've gone through all of these. You seem to agree with whatever we had on the spreadsheet for any of these, except for maybe 330. So if you don't, speak up, otherwise you have a choice now, and you do have to make a motion on this. If you want to take this to the full board for consideration, we definitely could do that for the next meeting, which is August 8th.
so I didn't hear any objections like on the
No,
first one,
I
but
think we should bring all but 330 to the board.
I
I
believe
agree.
so.
Do we need a motion for that?
Yes.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye. And
And
because
yeah,
I think we want to be careful that we don't get all these, guidelines into the policy. We want to make sure we've got that.
well, and we wouldn't have to if we just left this alone, but I think it's worth looking at.
Oh,
some
I
of these
do.
a little bit more.
I do too.
Yeah.
Especially since it's a concern for many.
I believe, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Tim.
So then the next thing we need to do is future meetings, and Randy wanted me to bring up to you, I sent the 3 of you at some point the list of meetings. Now, what I did quickly this morning, so we could look at it quickly, was I took my scribbly calendar and quick scanned it in. So this has a lot of stuff on it, but you guys are really just gonna look at the little policies that we have down here.
Okay.
So you sent us once that the 25th of August was a possibility. Is that not true anymore?
If you guys wanted to move that fast, we could,
I don't need to move that fast. I just need to erase it from my
but he
calendar.
does want, we do want to have some before, he wants the next couple months at least scheduled.
Okay.
So if you could agree on a September and an October, even a November meeting, that would be.
Well, and I have 2 policy committees, 2 meetings in September down. I have the 8th and the 22nd.
I don't know where you got some of these meetings to. You said that to me before. and
Yeah.
I was like.
I don't have any other. What do you-
Okay, maybe we talked, maybe I was just hoping we could meet off.
No, I think You
Well, it's
had
a fun
sent a
group.
list of
Yeah,
dates.
you
And that's
did.
where you got it from.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
you said suggested and put
Yeah.
these far out, but nothing was set for sure, so I
Yeah.
wrote
Okay.
it
Oh, okay.
down. Nothing's definite. Okay,
So I'm looking at the 22nd right now. If you thought you wanted to meet earlier than that, we definitely could. But was there somebody had something on?
I had something on the 20, it doesn't show up here now for some reason, but the 25th was the problem, but we could do it early. I think that's where I'm saying, like, if we can do it at 7.
So do you
whatever.
want to do it in August on the 25th? And I don't know if
no, I don't want to do it then because I thought it was gonna,
Okay,
I was gonna maybe have to not do that one, so
Okay.
that's great if you're not gonna schedule it.
okay.
And we could, if you, I'm just trying to think logistically, because this is kind of I mean, we go, because the 300s are kind of curriculum based, we do meet with Tim and we do meet with Ted, and then we meet with you, so it is kind of a 3-step process in my office,
Okay.
and maybe in Randy's office. So we gotta kind of look at other things too, and just decide if we can,
I'm good with the 22nd September. I think.
I have to,
Judy, are you good with the 22nd of September?
Yep.
I would prefer the morning.
Same.
Okay. So let me just, sure, just gotta write it down. September 22nd. And where do you want, like a 7:30? Or an 8?
Whatever,
So since we do want, this is gonna be in this vein, Amy and I are in a meeting from 8:30 to 9:30. So my suggestion would be either a 7:30 start or a 9:30 start.
either would work for me.
I like 7.
I like 7:30.
Okay. And then let's at least try to do one more. And we can do all of them if you wanted, but maybe let's just do a couple. So then I scheduled the next one for October 20th.
I had that date down. Must have been one you had earlier.
You know what, I thought we had a lot of conversation about a lot of things, and the first
Sure.
couple got just jumbled.
The 20th works for me in the morning.
Same thing.
You too?
Yep.
Do you guys want to do the same 7:30 again?
Sure.
Is this September or October?
October. Do you want to try to go through December? Do you want to look that far ahead?
Tim, does that work? I don't
For the
know.
morning of October
20th?
20th,
Second.
works great.
But if we work that far ahead, we don't know what problems are gonna come up and who needs to have.
Yeah.
If it needs to go to curriculum first, or,
Well, we can,
we can always change them.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd rather have them on the books and change them than just being out in the universe somewhere.
Okay, so then the 17th of November,
Does that work for you guys?
7:30 again?
Yeah.
And then the
Ted, does that work?
Yes.
15th of December.
Does that work?
Yes.
Oh,
7:30s, okay.
so why don't we just stop there for now and we'll see how this works.
All good.
Um,
I think we're up to adjourning.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for that.